Hi, this is PG of PG's Lumacy. In this tutorial, we will be making My Melody from the Sanrio character series, made on the extended Rainbow Loom. For the bands, we will be using white and red, and a few pieces of yellow and purple bands. For the eyes, we will be using seed beads, and you can get them in packs like this from the craft stores. We will be using the Rainbow Loom, which is extended to 5 pin bars wide, and that is a combination of 2 Rainbow Looms. And of course, you will need your hook. To string the beads with rubber bands, you will need this kind of floss. It is reinforced on one end, and it is used for dental bridges and braces. It would be good to have a fine crochet hook and a pair of tweezers for fine details in the design. But even without these items, you will be able to complete the project. Let us first prepare the piece for the eyes. And we will be stringing seed beads with a white rubber band. And to do that, we grab a piece of floss, reinforced on one end, and we insert the floss into the seed beads. And then we also get our rubber band onto the floss, and we reinsert the floss into the seed beads. Okay, that will form a loop that will pull the band into the seed beads, like so. And this will be the piece for the eyes. As with any Rainbow Loom project, it is not only important to place the bands in the right position, it is also very important to place them in the right order. So please pay attention to the order in which I place the bands. And unless otherwise specified, we will be using double bands for each step in this design. We will start with red bands, and we will do that for the ears. We place our first band on these pins, and next we place bands diagonally from this pin to this pin on the right side. Then we add another pair of bands to that. Okay. And then we complete the ear part with these bands on the side. And the next one will be placed diagonally from this pin to this pin. So this will be the layout for the left ear. Let's do that again for the right ear, and we will mirror what we did for the left ear. Let us now work on the head area, and always remember to place your bands in the right order. Okay, grab 2 red bands and place them from this center pin to this pin on the right. Let's do that again for the other side. Okay. Then let us add a row of white bands on the 3 middle pins. And we're using double white bands. to the sides, we will add red bands, and we will place them diagonally from this side to this pin. And we will do that on the other side as well. Okay. Now let us add white bands on this middle 3 pairs of pins. And on the sides, let us place red bands. Let us place another row of white bands to this middle pins. And to the sides, let us place red bands, and we will place them diagonally from this pin to this pin on the right, and on the other side from this pin to this pin on the left. And now we will add red horizontal bands to these pins. First on this side, and then on the other side. So that completes the bands for the head area. At this point, let us add the piece that we made for the eyes. And for the eyepiece, we will place one end, and you could use a hook for this. We will place one end on this pin, and then we will place the other end on the other side. Okay. Like so. Okay, and now let us work on the main body. Push down these bands to make room for the next bands we will be placing, and then place 2 white bands on these center pins. Then red bands placed diagonally on these 2 pins, and we will do that on the other side as well. Now, let us place 3 sets of white double bands on these center pins. And on these pins, let us place a series of 4 double white bands on each side. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of white double bands. Let's do that again on the other side. Then, starting from this pin, we will add a pair of white bands placed diagonally from this pin to this pin on the right. We add another pair of bands to that on the side, and then another pair placed diagonally on these 2 pins. So that is for the extension on the sides, 3 double white bands. Let's do that again on the other side. Now let us add diagonal bands on these 2 pins. And let's do that for this other side as well. Let us add the bands for the arms. So start with 2 red bands. Place them on this pin and on this pin on the right. It'll be diagonal bands on those pins. And then 2 white bands from this pin to this pin, and 3 white bands on these pins. So the arm bands are going this way. And then we cap these bands with a single band wrapped 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that again on the other side. 2 red bands, 2 white bands, 3 white bands, and then cap with a single band wrapped 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Let us now work on the legs. For the legs, we will add 2 bands to this pins, and then grab 4 white bands, and we will place them on this bottom pins on the right. And let us cap these bands with a single band wrapped 3 times. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. 3 times on this pin. 1, 2, and 3. Let's work on the other leg. And likewise wrap or cap with a single band wrapped 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let us add horizontal bands that will hold this piece together. And I'd like to place my first horizontal band on these pins. I'll place it across all 5 of them. And that's the first horizontal band. And the second one, I would like to place on this section over here. And I will place a double loop band. And to do that, we just place a single band, twist it on one end, and then loop it back. And that forms a double loop band for this section over here. Okay, and this will hold the pieces together. So this is now the resulting layout for the bands. You might want to pause the video and check to see if you have the same layout. Let us loop the bands starting at the bottom of the loom with the leg pieces. Go into the capping band and make sure you grab all 4 bands. Hold on to the capping band so it doesn't slip off. get the bands off the pin and then loop to this pin on the bottom. Okay, and then grab the two bands underneath and then loop to this pin. Let's do that for the other leg. Grab all 4 bands. Okay, and then loop to this pin and then loop these double bands. Okay. Now working on the main body, let us loop these row of bands, and we will loop the bands that are on top first. And in my case, it would be these bands. So we grab them and then loop. Next would be these bands. And then these bands. Let's do that for the other side. Okay, then let us loop these bands on this row. Next, let us loop these bands. Then we have these 3 bands, 3 pairs of bands, I mean. And now it is very important to remember that before we loop these bands, we have to loop the bands for the arms. So let's do that now. Go into the capping band, grab the 3 bands that are underneath, and then loop the 2 white bands. And then when you get to this red band, the looping is from this pin to this pin. Okay, make sure that is what you do. You grab the red band and then loop it to this pin. Let's do that again on this other side. Okay, it is very important to hold on to the capping band to avoid what just happened. Okay, so let's grab the 3 bands and then hold on to the capping band and then loop. Okay. Again, I'd like to remind you that the looping is from this pin to this pin. Like so. And now let us loop these bands. We will loop the red bands first. And then we will loop the white band. Let us loop these red bands and we find which of them are on top, and that is what we loop first. And in my case, it would be this pair of bands. So we go into the neck area and grab those two bands, get them out of the pin, and loop to this side. It would help to use the end of a crochet hook and release the bands like so. Okay, then let's work on these bands. Get them out of the pin and then loop to this pin on the side. Again, we release the bands because sometimes they're being pinched by this heavy layer of neck bands. And before we loop this white band, I would like to add the piece for the mouth, and we'll be using a single yellow band for that. We loop this single yellow band on this pin twice, 1 and 2, and then we grab one loop from the yellow band and place it on this pin. Okay, and I'll just even out the stretch on the band. Make sure you're not losing the two loops that you have on this pin. Now grab this side of the band and place it on this pin. And then I take out the twisting and put it here like so. Okay, you can actually keep it there, and then you even out the stretching again for this mouthpiece. We did that so that when we loop this pair of bands, okay, let's do that. Let's loop that pair of bands. I would like to get these two loops onto that band. Okay, very carefully get them out of the pin, and you will see that we now have the two loops that we made on these pair of bands, and later on this will form the mouth. I tried using beads on my prototype for that, and it didn't work, so I came up with this technique for the mouth. Let's see how it goes when we get this piece off the loom. Then let us loop these white bands, but you will notice that this pair of bands, red bands, is in the way, so let's loop them first. Okay. And then we can loop the white band. We also do that on the other side. This red band is on top of the white, so we loop it first. Okay. And then do the white bands. Let us loop this row of bands. When you get to this section, it is very important to take note of the looping sequence. We want to loop these white bands first, and then the red bands on the sides last. When I was doing my prototype, I looped these red bands first, and therefore the white went over them, and look at the shape that resulted from that. Kind of looks like little horns for my melody, and we don't want that. We want the whites to be covered with the red like so. So you have to remember the looping sequence for this. The white bands are looped first. So let's do that. Okay, then we loop the red bands on the side. Like so. And then when you get to these red horizontal bands, we would like to get the ones that are on top. In my case, it would be these bands. We loop them first. Okay, and then we loop the other bands on the other side. Now, before looping the ears, I would like to place horizontal bands on them as well to have a more compact shape for the ears. And we will be placing horizontal bands on these pins, and we will loop them 3 times. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, I have to do that again. The second one slipped off. Okay, so that's 3 times. Let's do that for this pair of pins. 1, 2, and 3. Let's do that for this other ear. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. And lastly for this pair of pins. Okay, that will give us a more compact shape for the ears. Let's loop the ears. Again, looking for the band that's on top. The pair of bands that are on top would be these bands, and we have to be careful. Make sure that we are getting the right bands. Okay, so go. Into this pin over here. Get the bands out and loop. And then loop all the way to the top. Let's do that for the other ear as well. This will be the resulting layout with the bands looped. You might want to pause the video and compare your work with the one on the screen. Let's secure the bands for the ears with a single band that is knotted. We do that for the other ear as well. We grab a single band and then we secure the top loops with that band. We tie a knot. Okay, don't over tighten this knot for now, so you will have wiggle room for the ears, the band for the ears. And now we are ready to pull the piece off the loom. So this is the figure that we get. Okay, so we will fine-tune the shape. We would like our ears to be compact. We stretch them out, but we would like the top portion of the ear to be roundish and not pointed, so we don't pull on this too much so that they won't get pointy, but we actually pull them from the sides like so. Okay, so that we will have rounded tips for the ears. Okay. Let's get the eyes in place. And then the mouth, we are fixing the double loop that we have here. We don't want it stretched out too much. Okay. And then for the legs, we would like to even out the stretching on our capping bands. We place the end of the crochet hook and then spin like so. So we will have a neater end piece. Okay, let's do that for this other leg. And then you flip the figure and then grab these bands and pull them outwards from the back. What that will do is that it will fold the legs so it will point forward, and our figure will look like it's in a seated position. I have made a decision that for my Sanrio characters, they will all be in a seated position. So that is what I'm doing here. Okay, so fine tune the shape. And for these end bands, as soon as we get our ears roundish at the tips and we get the shape that we desire for our ears, we tuck these end bands in at the back. Okay, so grab your hook and then just pull these end bands in, and get them into whichever bands will conceal them. Okay, so they're out of sight and we have a neat shape. Do that for this other ear as well. An optional feature that we could add to this figure would be a flower on her head. And I use 2 purple bands and I stretch these bands as much as I can without breaking them. And then I go into this section over here and grab 1 loop from the horizontal band that we placed. Did you remember the triple looped horizontal bands? Okay, so I grab 1 loop from those bands, like so. And then I get my 2 purple bands into that red band. Okay, and I make sure that my red band gets in the center of this purple bands, these bands that we put in here. Okay. Okay. Now what I do is that I get my yellow band and I stretch it. Oh, it's a good thing I stretch it out. I stretch out a yellow band a bit, just to make it more manageable. And then I get the yellow band into my purple bands. Like so. Okay. And then I tie a knot with the yellow band. And then I don't tighten that. Okay. Until I make sure that my purple bands are evenly stretched. Okay. And then that is when I tighten it. Okay. And then from the back of the figure, I insert my hook. So I get to the section where the purple bands are at. And then I pull my yellow band in. Okay. I make sure it does not twist the purple band. Okay, so I pull my yellow band into the figure and pull it out the back. Okay, I'm making sure it's the only band in my hook. So I pull it in a little at a time. Okay, I'm making sure my loops are in place. Okay, keep on pulling. Then I make sure that my loops are evened out. They will form the petals for the flower. And when I'm happy with what I see, okay, when I'm happy with what I see, that is when I pull it to form a tighter knot. And that will give you your flower piece. Okay. See that? So this is optional. You might find this hard to do. So it's up to you whether you wanted to put this flower on my melody's head. If you can, it will definitely be a good feature for the figure. And there you have it, my melody from the Rainbow Loom Sanrio Characters series.